You really got to be all in and fall in love with the problem that you're solving, right? And we all know entrepreneurship is a roller coaster of emotions. It's a roller coaster of, different moments, good, bad, and really, really ugly stuff that happens. And so you got to be in it for the long haul, right? You got to be in it for the marathon.
I'm Mike Pincus, co-founder of Connect CPA and your host at GrowthTales. Today's guest is Reuven Gorsht, the CEO of Deeded. Deeded helps solve what used to be one of the most stressful experiences for individuals, and that is closing a real estate transaction. Reuven and his team have built a special combination of lawyers, technology, and a process to simplify and enhance the closing experience over both purchasing and selling real estate. As a multi-time founder, Reuven has so much knowledge about scaling a business, and we discussed everything from the interest rate environment, how to leverage technology to solve data intake, and how to build a great team and culture. I really enjoyed my conversation with Reuven, and I hope you really enjoy this episode. Hey, Reuven, thanks so much for joining me today on GrowthTales.
Hey, Mike, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you joining it. And before we dive in, I'm going to first explain the black eye really quickly, because anybody watching this in video format is going to be like, why does Mike have a black eye? I got smacked in the eye by my 3-year-old daughter. That's the extent of it while we were in a swimming pool. But yeah, that's the story. But I could have given you something about Fight Club, but I figured I'd be honest and tell you what happened.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you feel better. And that's a good story to stick to.
Yeah. Definitely feeling better now. So Reuven, I want to first talk about just your origin story of Deeded, because I feel like you've built a really incredible company. The real estate space is an exciting space and something that people are following right now with fluctuations in interest rates and all the things changing in the world today. So why don't I just start off by asking you, where did the idea for Deeded come from?
Absolutely, Mike. So for me, it really came from my personal experience. About a few years back, I was buying a house. My wife and I were super excited about closing day. And particularly, I remember us sitting in the car in the driveway of our new home, and we're just waiting for a lawyer to give us a call and say, everything went through. You can come get the keys. And I think we had movers coming in that weekend. We had even, friends and family, they're going to drop by. And my phone rang before we actually expected the call. I look at the call display. It's my lawyer. I looked at my wife. I'm like, yeah, this is the moment we're excited about. But as you would imagine, didn't turn out to be that moment that we expected. I was actually missing a document, and kind of said, well, we're out of luck and we won't be able to close today. And I learned a mistake of not to close on a Friday. And I keep repeating that to anyone that will listen. So basically, we ended up homeless for the weekend. And, took our family to the Holiday Inn and had to untangle this whole mess of that was caused by this delayed closing, and including, we had bridge loans, we had movers that didn't have anywhere to put our stuff, and they offered to kindly leave it on the lawn or hold us ransom for a few days. So I started to take a look at the whole kind of discipline of, real estate, mortgage transactions are closed, started talking to a whole bunch of folks, realized that I wasn't the only one with the problem, realized that it happens quite often. There's not a lot of transparency. When I say transparency, it's just understanding what's going on and how you're kept in the loop from a communication perspective, especially if you think about real estate. It's a high value, probably the largest transaction you'll ever do financially for most people. And with that high value, it's high stakes, high stress, right? So everybody's on pins and needles, always looking forward to the moment that their home will close or their sale will close. But the journey to get there, unfortunately, was pretty painful from what I saw. And that's where the whole idea for really modernizing this whole process came to mind, and got together with a couple folks from the industry and brainstormed, and here we are.
Yeah, I want to talk about how Deeded is different, Reuven, because as you said, you wanted to change, revolutionize an industry that's been stuck in its ways for a long time. And we all know what that real estate anyone who's been around the block knows the traditional way of doing a real estate closing. You drive to your lawyer's office, you get presented with a bunch of papers that you don't understand with title transfers and all this sort of stuff. But some of the best business models are the ones that give back time to people. And I feel like Deeded has done that in a big way. So I wanted to ask you, what is different about the business model or the offering that you give to your customers versus the old way of doing things?
Yeah, so I would break it down to what we just talked about, transparency, or really understanding everything that's going on in real time and always feeling like you're in control. And that really stems from some concept like, for example, Amazon, or 25 years ago, Domino's invented the pizza tracker. I know it's hard to believe
Hmm.
it's been that long ago, but nowadays, Mike, I notice almost every business kind of follows the same blueprint, that your consumer is expecting to be well informed. They always want to know what's going on. They want to know that there's someone there to answer their questions, and they want that assurance that their transaction will close and will close smoothly. So that's really the first piece. So at Deeded, we have a technology that allows any of our home buyers or sellers, or if you're refinancing your mortgage, you can log in and get notified of every major milestone that your deal hits, right down to when you're
Hmm.
signing your documents, to, hey, don't worry, Mike, we've received all the information from the bank. You can sleep easy, and everything's on track. The second part of it is really that convenience of being able to do the transaction virtually. And as you mentioned, it used to be that you hire a real estate lawyer, but then you have to take time off work, drive to that lawyer's office, sign your documents. You walk away with a
Hmm.
stack this thick of documents. But there wasn't a lot of convenience to it, right? So lawyers typically will work 9 to 5. So here we are taking some time off work. We're driving downtown. We're paying $35 for parking. And nowadays you could do it virtually. So that's convenient on its own, but also it's a change of environment. We find, people sitting in their living room after they, put their kids to bed, are much more at ease, and the stress eases from, having to be there for, 20 or 30-minute appointment, or sitting in a waiting room and not being able to ask questions. And again,
Hmm.
high stakes process, high stress. People have a lot of questions, especially if they're first time buyers, or maybe they haven't bought or sold a property in a while. So we find there's the convenience, there's the security, and then there's just being in a different type of environment to be able to close your transaction at ease. And essentially, you could do it from anywhere. You could do it from, your office at your lunch hour. We've had folks do it from their car, sign their documents. So just having that aspect. So everything we do is really tailored around what does today's modern consumer want, and it really indicates that it's seamlessness. It's that sense of control. I know what's going on. I'm in control. I'm in the loop, and all of that forms a very, very unique experience. There's really nothing else, nothing else like it, in terms of how the industry is traditionally operated.
And I think you've really solved, as you alluded to, a really complex problem, but it is a complex problem. So I want to ask Reuven, as the entrepreneur, as CEO of a company, you've got a lot of moving parts to make that value work for the customer, meaning it sounds like lawyers, technology, and other team members or people that are working on more administrative items, you have to get all of them working in unison and then make it into a business model where you're allocating, I guess, components of time and energy from a business model perspective to have each closing be profitable. How did you think about structuring this as an entrepreneur? Because it sounds it's an amazing concept of the problem that you're solving. But now the execution of that problem sounds very complicated in terms of you have really high level professionals and lawyers, you've got technologists, you've got other team members that are working on those other aspects. How did you think about putting all this together, and how do you deal with that now? I know it's a loaded question, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to hear
no,
your thoughts. And
it's challenging nonetheless, but the way we look at everything, Mike, is through the lens of the customer. Ultimately,
Mhm.
and the customer here could be the end consumer, someone who's buying or selling a home or refinancing their mortgage. It could be one of our partners. We work through real estate agents, mortgage brokers, lenders, or it could be one of our team members and lawyers, etc. So we've essentially taken an approach to personify and determine every stakeholders' needs, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
stakeholders. So
Hmm.
it was a lengthy process, and it's always ongoing. But by understanding what does every party needs and what's kind of the happy path, what's the journey that a lawyer might need for their regulation and assurance and to deliver the best quality of service, what does a consumer want? We talked about transparency and convenience and so on. So everything we do really aligns to those paths, right? In terms of what's the right thing to do for every persona that we have that's leveraging or using our platform, and then slowly but surely you go piece by piece, and then make some mistakes, figure things out, iron them out, and ultimately it's all about aligning around our vision, and our vision is really to make that closing piece of the real estate transaction really simple and streamlined and essentially effortless, as well. And I think when you have the entire team, that includes again your internal, your external stakeholders, when everybody's aligned around that same vision, everybody sees the same thing and everybody sort of aligns to what their part is or what their piece is in that process.
Yeah, and I like how you said that you have to cater this to all the different stakeholders, both from a customer perspective, but also an internal perspective in order to make it all work. I want to know, how important are partnerships in the business that you're building, Reuven? Meaning that the the conduits, the real estate industry, you've got your realtors, you've got lenders and mortgage brokers. It seems like you need relationships with everyone in order to make the ecosystem work well. How important are those partnerships to Deeded?
I'd say they're critical, but it's also with the lens of having the right partnerships. So the
Hmm.
reason, real estate is so archaic is because it's a highly fragmented industry. So it's a blessing and a curse, right? So if
Hmm.
you think about it, there's as many experiences out there for home buyers as there are realtors, mortgage agents, lenders,
Hmm.
lawyers. So your path can go in so many different ways. Ultimately, as we know, the holy grail for any business is delivering a great consumer experience that's differentiated. Everyone's looking at, the Amazons and the Ubers as a
Hmm.
model. So ultimately for us, partnerships are critical, but the big realization is also the right partnerships are even more critical, which means
Hmm.
we're not for everyone. We're not
Hmm.
out there for the masses to say, scream from the top of the mountain and say things should be different. But if you do believe that consumer experience matters, whether you're a real estate agent or a lender or a lawyer, and you buy into things should be simplified in the 21st century and beyond, then we're the right fit and we want to nurture that partnership. And again, it goes back to the basics of, Mike, you as a partner, per se, what are your needs? How do we add value? And that's how we look at our entire business. It's like, what does the party need from a partnership perspective, and how do we add value to you and your business, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great way of looking at it. I'm also curious about when you conduct your planning as an owner in a business and you're looking at like the forecasts and figuring out what is this going to look like for the year. I don't have an amazing pulse on the macro environment in real estate, but you probably have a better pulse than I do, Reuven. So I'd love to know your thoughts on the interest rate environment. Are you seeing an uptick or downtick in closings in general? What are you seeing in real estate right now, and how does that impact you when you conduct your planning for having capacity to handle the volume of closings that might come your way?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a loaded question, Mike, because the real
Mhm.
estate market is a huge topic, and interest rates are a huge topic. I think for every Canadian, whether you're a homeowner or you aspire to be a homeowner. The way I would sum it up is obviously we've seen things go to an insane level during COVID, right?
Mhm.
People were buying homes and cottages and investment properties as
Oh
if
yeah.
there was no tomorrow. And I remember stories of, properties appreciating literally like 10 or 15% overnight. Somebody would buy a place, sign on the dotted line, and the next day their place is worth 100 grand more. So we've gone from breaking records in 21, part of 22, to breaking other records now in 23 and 24, where we all know the interest rates went up, and that the
Mhm.
interest rates drive a lot because ultimately everything comes down to a monthly payment.
Yeah.
And if your monthly payment, was when you bought your place $2,000 a month, and all of a sudden now you're renewing your mortgage and your payment's $4,000 a month, you're going to have to come up with $2,000 after tax to pay for that. And as we all know, cost of living has increased significantly as well. When we go to the grocery store, when we look to, pay our home insurance and all that stuff. So needless to say, um, it's created a tough situation. I think a lot of Canadians are in a tough situation right now. And if they're not, there's about $900 billion, that's B with a B, billion, that are coming up for renewal over the next 12 to 24 months. And we know what happens there. Like people got very attractive rates back a couple of years ago, and now your mortgage is going to be renewing, your payments are going to go up. There's already unprecedented levels of inventory in Toronto and Vancouver. So real estate's had a great ride for 20 years. And all we're used to, at least in my generation, is seeing that hockey stick appreciation and FOMO from getting into the market. Personally, I think we're in for some adjustment until the interest rate environment, settles. And when I say settles, I don't think we're expecting interest rates to go back to the level of 2021 when it was almost kind of free money from an interest perspective. But nonetheless, perhaps it's a welcome change, because I think we're also with that 20 years of straight appreciation. A lot of folks have been priced out of the market. I don't think affordability is even a word anymore. I think it's extreme unaffordability at six-figure income levels. Can't afford to buy, even a starter condo in the city of Toronto and markets like Vancouver.
Vancouver too, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I mean, from our perspective, we're in a transaction business. So people are always buying, selling, refinancing their mortgage, renewing their mortgage, and things like that. So we're seeing an even bigger opportunity. But I think, for a lot of folks that might be watching or listening, a lot of folks are kind of scratching their head and thinking about the next move, especially if you're a homeowner, or perhaps you've got a good portion of your assets invested in real estate.
Yeah, and it's something I think it's on the minds of many Canadians. I know it's obviously a political topic as well, and when we talk about elections and the things that are going to be hot topics, is the affordability out on the West Coast in Vancouver and obviously in Toronto. Like, the major cities are becoming so expensive to live, like you said, not just from a real estate perspective, but in general. As these things unwind and all these shifts happen in the market, what do you say are some of the biggest challenges you face just running a business? Because, Reuven, it sounds like there's at least some unpredictability around, or uncontrollables related to, how many closings might transpire in a year. What are some of the biggest challenges you face in running?
It's more so, I believe, adjusting to different market conditions. It's understanding, again, like you mentioned, forecasting. So forecasting in a market that typically is predictable. So, and I say it is predictable is because real estate's a very seasonal business. Typically, we'll see a nice uptick through the spring and summer, and then it goes quiet again. So I think if you map out those transactional patterns for the last 20, 25 years, they've been fairly typical. But for the last 3 to 4 years, they've been very atypical, meaning, there's either extreme demand, or right now what we're seeing is the other extreme, that, there's tons of properties sitting there with a for sale sign. I even drove this weekend through the countryside, and, you have these country roads, and every road, every intersection had like 5 or 6
for
signs,
sale, yeah.
right? For sale signs. So it tells you, things are not moving, or at least they're not moving as quickly as possible as they can. Prices, I don't know that prices have adjusted to market reality, which is perhaps the reason why properties are sitting on the market. But ultimately, when we look at our business, we've gotten used to that. It's atypical in terms of, one day could be incredible. We could, see a dramatic number of transactions come in. The next day can be slower. And again, there's different patterns, even so much so as like, hey, it was a beautiful weekend, so a lot of people went out to see homes and they bought homes. So over the weekend, and we get really busy on Monday. So very hard to predict, but we're also using that as an opportunity to learn and continue to build. Because we do know at the end of the day, the real estate market is still going to be a very prevalent one, especially in Canada. Every Canadian dreams of home ownership, so it's still going to
Mhm.
happen one way or another. The government's sinking in billions of dollars to make homes more affordable and seeking even different options, multiplexes and things like that for housing. So we remain very optimistic that in a longer term, and this is a long tail play, the market
Mhm.
will fare up better and number of transactions will grow and we're going to see some sort of return to normalization in terms of the seasonality and forecasting.
I always wonder, and I want to ask you this: is it possible? We know demographically, you've got like millennials, Gen X, boomers. There's no secret, boomers are a massive part of the population from just like a numbers perspective. And people are living way longer than they used to, but there's no doubt there's a trend of downsizing out of bigger homes when you become an empty nester or moving to condos. And there's just a lot of real estate type transactions that will be happening or will continue to happen with boomers. I feel like we're not quite at the peak of that yet. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I feel like that's on the horizon, that there could be a major upswing just in volume of transactions. Have you guys ever discussed that? Or, like, do you look at the demographics and say, or is it just more of like, we know that's in the long tail, year to year, we're not really focused on looking at like these big events of like massive upswings in volume that could happen. So let's say in the next 5 years or whatever it might be.
Well, I mean, some of those things take years to manifest as well, right? Because
Hmm.
I think what we saw during COVID is we saw a lot of boomers selling and maybe moving out of town, maybe buying that dream cottage to retire in and cash out on their Toronto properties that have appreciated so well, right?
Hmm.
It's a little bit hard with all the noise that's happening out there to determine any specific trends or sort of attach ourselves to any specific trend. But we do know there's a lot of first time buyers that are chomping at the bit to jump into the housing
Hmm.
market. Perhaps they're waiting for a better deal, for prices to drop. Perhaps they're
Or
waiting
interest
for
rates.
interest rates to be more
Yeah.
attractive. Because again, at the end of the day, I always say it's just about the payment. It's just about the monthly
Hmm.
payment. So either you're going to get a good deal on a property, you're going to pay way below what it's worth. So you're going to save money and you're going to have a lower payment, or the interest rates come down and you're going to have a lower payment. So there's a lot of pent up demand out there, and people still know, Canadian real estate's valuable. People want to jump on it. I think, like any market downturn, it's all psychological, right? Like it's very ironic that, probably the same property that was listed 2 years ago might have had 50 people put in an offer, and
Hmm.
that same property is listed today and nobody shows up at the open house, right?
It's all
And
timing.
yeah, same property, desirable, and yeah, it's all timing and it's all psychological, right? We just tend to go with those waves, and that's what drives free markets, right? When you think about it.
Yeah. And Reuven, I'm kind of curious, how are you spending your time these days as an owner in a business, as a CEO of a company? Like, it sounds like you have a lot going on. You have marketing, you have sales, you have operations, you're dealing with things that are obviously legal. How are you spending your time? Like, what do you do on an average day? Like, what did you do today when you woke up and going to podcasts with people like me? Like, what is the day look like for Reuven?
Well, for me, it's really a variety. I mean, I love and enjoy the building part, the creative part. So I try to generally dedicate my mornings to the creative side of the business, or working on the business for at least the first couple hours of the day. Then try to get into some of the tactical stuff, in terms of how the business is running, what are we seeing, what are the trends. I'm still very active in in with customers and business development, and staying very very close to our both our teams and our customers and partners, because we're still evolving and building our product. So I try to spend a good portion of my time keeping my ear to the ground, getting
Mhm.
feedback, ironing out what needs to be ironed within our organization, as well as looking to the future. And we're fortunate enough to be in a state again where there's a lot of innovation that's happening not only in our niche of the market, but also up and around us. So trying to understand that and connect the dots. That's where I would say most of my time goes.
Yeah, I asked you the question also because I see you doing presentations. I always see on LinkedIn that you're quite active in being a thought leader in your space, and so I was just very curious about how you spent your time. And it sounds like you kind of block your calendar in the morning to kind of plan out, as you said, those higher level priorities in terms of technology. Because I know you are progressive on that front as well. Obviously, a big buzzword you're hearing about a lot these days is AI and just using all forms of available technology to try to streamline things, especially things that are repeatable. And you definitely are in a business model where there's elements of potential for automation and things. How much can the current technology state, like AI and those and no code and code, help this solve the repeated work that needs to be done on every single closing versus how much of it is still bespoke and edge cases and things that just like you can't solve yet without people? Where does that sit today and how do you think about those problems?
That's a great question. I think the way technology is evolving, I mean, the answer I can give you today might not be the answer tomorrow. But
Mhm.
the way we think about it goes back to what are the outcomes and what's the experience that we're trying to empower. And ultimately for us, it's not taking humans out of the loop. It's
Mhm.
empowering those humans to add value where it matters most. So for example, going back to a real estate closing, the fact that you have to put together documents and chase different data and
Mhm.
copy and paste between systems and all that stuff can be automated. And when we do automate it, it means that more of our team can spend more time with customers and
Right.
partners, essentially explaining things and answering questions and hand holding them through the process, making them feel like every closing is bespoke, and it is indeed bespoke, but just it's accentuating that experience that we want to deliver out there. We don't want the necessarily, hey, I just upload my documents and 5 minutes later my deal is closed. We know people have anxiety. We know people have questions. So everything we think about from a technology roadmap perspective is, yes, it's about how do we become more efficient, but then redirecting those resources into where we can have impact and an advantage as well.
I tend to think about things almost identically to you, Reuven, which is these tools right now are, first of all, early days, and it's more like an Iron Man suit than it is a replacement to a talented team. At least that's what I'm hearing from you, right?
Yeah, no, and again, like there's always going to be opportunity, and we're using AI quite a bit.
Mhm.
But a lot of it is early days, is understanding, how does it fit into our different use cases, and where do we leverage it where it matters the most? Because I think, what's happening with any trend, be it, mobile or AI, or I've lived through, so many of these waves, and I have no doubt that AI will be a game changer, will have
Mhm.
massive impact, on our business and even productivity globally. But at the end of the day, it's rationalizing the signal from all the noise and just making sure that we're not just doing AI for the sake of doing AI. We're picking the right use cases. Again, we're sticking to our strategy of where can we just amplify and make things more efficient, in order to redirect some of our efforts.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to think about it because we all don't know exactly where it's going to land, but we have some time to figure that out.
For
Ruben,
sure.
my last question, because I don't want to hold you much longer. I know you probably have meetings to get to today. You've been in business a long time, and you've obviously seen a lot from a venture perspective. I'm curious, what are some points of advice you would give to younger entrepreneurs or people that are starting their first business, or maybe they're onto their second business and they want to learn from that first business? What's some advice you would give to someone that right now is looking to someone that's already gone through some of the scaling journey and they want to solve something in their own business? Any advice you could give to anyone?
I think for me, one principle that I've stuck to, and it's cliche because it's been repeated a lot of times, is you really got to be all in and fall in love with the problem that you're solving, right?
Mhm.
And we all know entrepreneurship is a roller coaster of emotions. It's a roller coaster of, different moments, good, bad, and really, really ugly stuff that happens. And so you got to be in it for the long haul, right? You got to be in it for the marathon. To me, what matters the most is that, I wake up in the morning and I'm working on a problem that I'm truly passionate about. And I
Mhm.
know it's difficult and it's challenging, but I do believe in solving that problem. So that's what gets me excited and, wanting to get out there on, presentations and podcasts and really share it with the world. And it also helps through tough times, right? Like everyone's got their tough days where it's like, well, I shouldn't have woke up this morning. I should have stayed in bed.
Mhm.
And that's where that's where the thinking is. I'm really solving a worthwhile problem that's challenging, and it's not just, an idea that I had a couple weeks ago and tried my best, but it's, not really in love with what I'm doing.
That's amazing advice. And I've heard that advice myself, that if you're just chasing money and you're not passionate about the problem, you start to realize that being an entrepreneur is 10 to 100x the difficulty of just almost any job that you could possibly have. And people don't know that or don't realize that until they sit in that seat. And so you go into it chasing money and you're like, wow, this is way harder than I thought. So I think that's incredible advice, Reuven. And I wanted to thank you for joining me. I know you're super busy and you're building an incredible company at Deeded. And I see you guys growing and growing and growing. And I'm excited because it is a better way to handle a closing. Real estate is only going to become just real estate and technology is only going to become more and more important as time goes on. And as we have these big topics, like you said, in Toronto, Vancouver, in our markets, I wanted to thank you. And I guess anyone who wants to, where can people find you, Reuven, in case they want to get in contact with you? What's the
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so our website is Deeded CA. If you want to
Mhm.
check out Deeded, or if you got a real estate closing coming up, or you're refinancing your mortgage, we'd be more than glad to help you. Best way to reach me is Reuven Gorsht on LinkedIn. Pretty active, so send me a connection request, just and or a private message.
Amazing? Thanks so much, Reuven. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care.